Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. My topic for tonight, is Israel slash Palestine, Ukraine, and emerging multipolarity. So, what I'm concerned with here tonight is the impact that adding the war on Gaza to the war in Ukraine is likely to have on the emergence of the multipolar world. I thought it might be a good idea to lift our eyes from the carnage, in Gaza, which of course is occupying the attention of everybody on the news, to begin to consider the larger implications of this. So, I'm going to try to do that here tonight. So first of all, we have to note that the Russians have been advancing in Ukraine. They've been advancing all along the line of contact. The advances, of course, have so far been rather slow and also deliberate. The Russians are always deliberate. They're always careful. But people have pretty much recognized now that the Ukrainian counteroffensive, the vaunted counteroffensive of the Ukrainians, is over. And that now, it's the Russians who are organizing and accumulating forces for a major offensive of their own. Speculation is from those who know the Russians very well and who follow their activities day to day. The contention is that they will not try to conquer the whole, of Ukraine, but they will move for Kharkov first, and then once they've secured that particular target, they will move south and go to the seaport, of Odessa, and will take that. Why take those two areas? Supposedly there are 4 of the oblasts, of Ukraine in those 2 areas. The reason why they will do that is because Kharkov is predominantly a Russian area, and Odessa is also predominantly, a Russian area. And that what the primary objectives are of the Russians now is to get all the Russian people that were part of Ukraine back into Russia. The feeling from the experts in this area is that at that point they will stop, because they really don't want to take over, by Ukraine. I think the expectation is that they will set up, a puppet government there, and that they will move to control the politics of the puppet government, in such a way that that government will always remain, a neutral state, or one, that is under the influence of Russia, and Russian politics. But they will not take over that state. It will have a certain amount, of autonomy, and the long-term fate, of the Ukrainians will be up to their population I have to mention that by all the accounts that I'm seeing, the population is down from 43 to 44 million in Ukraine before the war. Because so many people have left, it's now down to 19 or 20 or 22 million, something like that. Half the population, in other words, has gone seeking safety, in other places. If there is a peace treaty signed, and even if the peace treaty is imposed by Russia, there are many of the Ukrainians who will probably return because it is, after all, their land. But it would probably be surprising if more than, let's say, 10 million were to return. So we're probably looking at a much smaller and disarmed state inside of the Ukraine that has been removed, of its Nazis, and that has a small army whose purpose will be to keep order there. But that nation of Ukraine will not be allowed to enter the Western orbit. Certainly not until and unless there's a new security framework, in Eastern Europe, which the East European nations and Russia are all happy with. So that looks like the future of things there. But meanwhile, the Ukraine war still goes on. It's still going to cause more death, probably for the next 6 months or so, would be my estimate. And it's still going to require, a lot of attention from the United States and from the collective West and from Russia, as well. However, the breakout of full-scale war in Israel-Palestine has now created, a new dimension to the conflict, of East and West. Because of what Hamas has done, and especially because of the Israeli response, in my view, an extreme overreaction, and the continuation of that overreaction day by day, and the killing of more and more people. Fatalities are now probably up to something like 9,500. If we include the casualties or the murders that come out, of the Jabalia attack, between 9,000 and 9,500 people will have died. Of course, the Israeli dead from the Hamas attack, which fatalities have not been fully verified by the Israelis yet, but estimated at roughly 1,400. We're looking at 6 or 7 times that number of killed on the Palestinian side now. So you might ask, how many Palestinians killed would be enough to persuade Israel that they've had their revenge and that now they should seek the peace. Hey, Steve, how you doing? Hi, Robert, how are you doing? I can't answer that particular question. It's clear there's a lot of extremist sentiment, okay, in Israel, which shares that speech, okay, from Netanyahu, where he referred to Amalek and the necessity to completely destroy Amalek. Okay, obviously, identifying the Gazans with the Amalekites, okay, in the Bible. Oh, here is Madeline Hoffman. Hi, Madeline,
Hi, Joe. Dee's on her way also.
and welcome.
Thank you. Thank
Nice
you.
to see you here. So I was just basically reviewing the bidding here. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I started out with a statement on what the state of affairs is, okay, in the Ukraine war,
Oh.
and I stated that I expected that that would be over within the next 6 months, okay, or so, and that there would be, okay, a Russian victory there. I also stated I thought that the Russians would move on to Kharkov and conquer that area, and they would
Mm,
go to Odessa and conquer
mm,
that area, okay, as well. And I
mm,
thought that then they would stop and they would impose a settlement, okay, on the Ukrainians,
mm,
probably overthrow the regime or cause the overthrow, okay, of the regime. And then they would negotiate a peace which would allow the continued existence, okay, of the Ukrainian state, and that it might be possible for 10 million or so, okay, of the Ukrainians to return to that state,
mm,
probably leaving Ukraine with a population of perhaps 30 million following the war, compared to the 43 to 44 million that they started
mm,
the war with.
mm,
So, uh, from my point of view, it seems like that settlement would be one that would, uh, for the foreseeable future, prevent anything else except for the neutrality uh, um, 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 of Ukraine, with the balance leaning towards the Russian side extremely heavily. Okay, that Russia would basically establish Ukraine as a satellite, okay, of Russia. Okay, it would be an autonomous sort, okay, of satellite, but basically its foreign policy would be controlled by Russia. Uh, so that's what I think is going to happen there. But that means that there's another 6 months of fighting there probably still to go. And of course, that also means that at the same time, the attention of the collective West, okay, in the United States now has to turn uh, to the war, okay, in Gaza, okay, and in Palestine, okay, in the occupied areas. And uh, it remains to be seen what, okay, the collective West is going to try to do, okay, in this area. Uh, okay, it seems to me that world opinion is quickly and heavily shifting against the Israelis, okay, and the position of the United States. I believe it's shifting so quickly that within a few weeks we're going to get a General Assembly resolution that uh, okay, is going to try to put a stop to any further Israeli attacks, that it will try to enforce, okay, a ceasefire, and then we'll try to work through some sort of settlement, okay? But I don't think the international community as a whole is going to allow the Israelis to continue with their indiscriminate bombing, of Gaza, and with the killing of so many Palestinians, that after the Jabalia attack, most probably the fatalities are now in the range of 9,000 to 9,500 fatalities on the Palestinian side. Okay, I mentioned also that if we compare that with the 1,400 fatalities which the
Mm.
Israelis are claiming, but
Mhm.
which hasn't really been fully verified by them yet, that we're looking at a ratio of more than 6 to 1, okay, in fatalities there. And I wondered whether that was a sufficient amount of actual revenge to
Yeah.
satisfy, the Israelis, so that they would move to accept a ceasefire and to try to negotiate a peace settlement and a security framework that would be an enduring one for the area. But as all this relates to the multipolarity question, what I think, is at issue here is that both the result that's coming, in Russia, and the result that I think is coming, in the Middle East as well, both of those results will be interpreted by the world as a severe diminishing of the power, of the
Mm.
collective West, and will hasten, the development of, a multipolar world. And I expect to see that as a result of the failure of the United States to maintain its position, as the hegemon of the world, both in Eastern Europe, and in Israel, in the Middle East. I think that that is going to embolden the resistance to empire, in other areas of the world as well, in Africa, yet in Latin America, as well. I think the BRICS nations are going to continue to expand in power, increase in power. Inside of the UN, they seem to be cooperating with each other now, I notice. And so I think these two engagements by the West
Hmm.
in such an extreme way will cause a further depressing of the influence and power of the West, within the international system, and a further emergence of more important and regional powers. In the Middle East, I think that means increasing importance for Egypt, for Turkey, and Iran. For Latin America, I think it means increasing importance for Brazil, and for Colombia.
Bolivia, perhaps too.
Perhaps Bolivia, though perhaps the population there is not sufficiently large to make them, a major power.
No, but
Colombia's
they're
population,
on the same side
yes.
as
However, Colombia's population is in the range of 50 million, isn't it?
I believe so.
So the population of Colombia is larger than that of Argentina at this point, because
Mm.
Argentina's population has been stagnant for many years.
I'm gonna check for you here.
Okay, and so probably Brazil, and Colombia are likely to become fairly shortly the major power and the major powers in South America that other countries are going to organize around to try to resist the incursions of the United States into South America.
The 52 million, 51.96.
Pretty close then.
Yeah, very close.
Okay, and how that compares to Argentina? What is the population of Argentina? Roughly 42 million right now.
I'm going to check. And we still have to deal with Peru. 45.8, well, 2021 was 45.81 million.
Okay,
Let me see if there's a number. Let's see if there's a number for 2023. Just a moment. Because the number I gave you for Colombia was 2023.
okay,
And I don't want to compare apples to oranges.
good idea.
I could try, but it's, 2023 right now is 45,773,000. It's increased. It's been increasing very, very slowly since 2021.
Okay, what's Argentina?
Oh, just a moment. Here, I'm looking at the trends here. 45,773,000, and it in 2013, so no, 2012, 20, okay, going way back to the late 1990s, the population number for Argentina was down to 39 million, 37 million, 36, 35, 34, 33, 32. So it's been slowly increasing. And it's now at 45 million.
Okay, so it's at 45 million, Peru is at 45 million, and Colombia is at 52 million.
52 million. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because down in 1962, it was 21 million in Argentina. Wow. Yeah. So, but politically, I don't know. Colombia is pretty well for right now. Petro's got 3 more years, basically. Who knows what's going to happen? You know, because
Who
we
knows
see,
what's going to happen? The United States, of course, will be
yes,
doing its best to overthrow him.
yes, just like they did in Pedro Castillo in
Yes,
Peru.
and
So,
we'll probably continue to try to overthrow the government, okay, of Venezuela.
oh yeah,
We
oh yeah, they were cheering when there was an opposition candidate to Maduro.
yes,
Cheering.
just cheering about that, right? So we'll be operating there, and the resistance there,
Mm-hmm.
encouraged and empowered by the impact of what is going on in the Middle East right now,
You're right.
and the impact, okay, of what is going on, okay, in Eastern Europe, okay, right now. So there will be, I think, more powers to contend with in the world, more regional powers and more superpowers, because the Indians are not that far from being, okay, a superpower.
Oh, India, you mean?
Yes, India.
Yeah, because there's indigenous in Bolivia and Venezuela. Just
Yes,
needed to clarify. Yes.
yes. That we refer to, okay, as Indians because of the mistake that
Hmm.
was made by Columbus, who thought that he had reached India. That
He made many mistakes, but that was a biggie.
was a biggie. Yeah, that
um,
certainly was a biggie. Okay,
and
so
let me just add one really quick thing, and that is that Petro has reestablished relationships between Colombia and Venezuela, Colombia and Nicaragua, Colombia and Cuba. So that will help with what you're talking about, because the previous administration followed what the U.S. attitude was toward those countries, and So there was no unity or alliance really
Yes, and they were
between.
quite hostile also to the Maduro the
Oh,
government.
Juan Guaido, we selected you. I
No
mean,
more Juan Guaido. Okay, so we have these changes continuing to accelerate uh,
yes.
in the world. The Belt and Road Initiative is going to continue to accelerate. Uh, we have to look very carefully for some changes now. There's supposed to be an upcoming meeting between Biden and Xi
Yeah.
in just a few weeks. The word is that Xi is going to come to San Francisco, okay,
Hmm.
at the invitation of the governor of California,
Oh, Gavin Newsom.
Governor Newsom, yes, whom I like to refer to, okay, as Bobo Newsom. Uh, but anyway, he is evidently brokering, okay, a meeting between Biden,
Hmm.
okay, and Xi.
Hmm.
And the question is whether anything of use will come out of such a meeting.
Hmm.
Uh, right now, with the involvement in the Middle East, the heavy involvement there, okay, in the Middle East, and the still heavy involvement, okay, in the Ukraine situation, the United States is really, really stretched.
Oh, yes.
It has wanted to turn to the Pacific to try to surround China and constrain the further growth and influence of China in the Pacific. But the United States does not now have the resources to do that. Okay. I don't mean the financial resources to do it.
Yeah, the military resources. Yeah.
It doesn't have the real resources to do it. Okay, it will probably take years to get the real resources uh, to do it, but it is difficult for the United States to make a beginning on that when it's so heavily involved in Eastern Europe, okay, and also the Middle East. So it may be time for the United States to give up its Middle Eastern involvement as a bad job, okay, just something that is going to be too draining in real resources for the United States to pursue over the years. I sincerely hope
Yeah.
that that is what happens.
You and me both.
Okay, because from the standpoint of our needs for energy, we, the United States, don't have to be involved, okay, in the Middle East. We're perfectly capable of polluting our own environment with our own energy resources. We do not need the Middle East energy resources to do that.
No.
Uh, I think what we should be focusing on is the shift, okay, to alternative energy as quickly, okay, as we can make that particular shift and put the fossil fuels here in the United States to rest and hopefully create such a boom with the success of that particular technology that we can influence the rest of the world to move towards that as quickly as possible, okay, as well.
Well, and we may very well need to take our lead from Gustavo Petro here in Colombia because he wants to establish himself as a leader on the issue of global climate change. And he seems to be very serious about it. And I feel that U.S. politicians, at least right at this point in time, give lip service to the idea. So we shall see yet again. But he could play a big role in turning things around. He could play.
He could play a big role in turning South America around.
Yeah, but he's not. Yes, but if South America and Central America, if something like that happens, it may, I don't know if anything will shame the United States, to be honest, but it might put pressure on the United States to be more serious. For example, there's a very large anti-fracking group in Colombia. Um, and, if Colombia fights back hard on that, where is the U.S. fracking industry going to go? And so some of where Petro stands on this could help back up, or change the direction of U.S. policy on climate change.
Yes, it could serve to influence policy. Uh, okay, it would also help if the combination of Colombia with other South American nations,
Yes.
specifically Brazil, were to unite, okay, in doing that, then that would be, I think, a powerful influence, okay, on the North Americans. Certainly, it would be a powerful influence on the Latin American portion, okay, of North America. Uh,
No, Latin America is not a part. Well, are you talking about Mexico?
okay, I'm talking of the area from Mexico through Panama.
That
Uh,
would be Central America.
yes, that is often called Central America. That's right.
But I do agree with you, and I do think it is Petro's intention to be a leader beginning in Latin America on this, and that would be much stronger than just he himself. He has made some very powerful speeches on this, but I need to talk to my environmental activist friends here to see exactly where that's all going. Because there was election day on Sunday, and one place that was absolutely opposed to the building the world's largest or second largest gold mine in Colombia, the leadership of that town, Cajamarca, that leadership went from being anti gold mine to being pro gold mine.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, there were some disappointing results, and I need to get a better read of it. Um, so whatever Petro is going to do, it may not be. It's certainly not going to be easy, but I think he's. It seemed like he was very serious about trying to do that.
Have you any impression about where Mexico stands, okay, on alternative energy?
Unfortunately, I don't. Um, I don't want to. I don't have any idea really. But I can check. I know places in Peru and Honduras. What's going on right now in those countries is just that dump the corruption needs to find its way down south of the border, because big money is, vacuuming up the votes and such. Um, but I don't know about Mexico. I can check. I'd be glad to look into that.
Okay. That would be important for us gauging how Latin America will be going,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in the medium term anyway.
Yeah, I will check for sure.
Okay, but I think whichever way Mexico is going on, green energy, I'm sure it's starting on it. Uh, all throughout the whole, okay, of Latin America, there's going to be resistance, okay, to the U.S. empire. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to see, okay, a lot of that. And that is going to be facilitated by the perceptions, okay, that the United States, while still a superpower, is getting far weaker, okay, in comparison to other nations, and that there are other nations that are also superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
Still other nations that are regional powers. Okay, I think in the Middle East, uh, there will be no superpower, but there will be a number of regional powers. Okay, in that area. Okay, and Egypt. Okay, and Turkey and Iran. Okay, of course. Okay, immediately come to mind.
Yeah, and I mean Russia may have more of an influence as well. Um, but yes, I I think this latest whatever this latest what would you um, disaster being played out in the Middle East is going to seriously affect the U.S. role in the Middle East in a negative way.
Oh,
Um,
yes, I believe so too. That for the United States, okay, its position right now in the Middle East, uh, in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is that it's just a lose-lose. Okay, for the United States,
yeah,
I don't think there's any way for the United States to win except to totally change its foreign policy. Okay, in the Middle East, and I don't think our foreign policy leaders within either the Biden administration or any Republican successor administration, okay, have either the vision, uh, either the vision, okay, or the desire to make the changes that the United States would have to make in order to have its activities in the Middle East increase, okay, its influence there.
yeah. Right now, they just keep repeating the same lies. They're serving as a channel through which Israel gets its propaganda out. Um, and that's not helping either. It's not helping either of them. Not helping Israel. It's not helping the U.S. And I agree with you, Joe. They're gonna. Well, they certainly can't be looked. The U.S. certainly can't be looked upon as someone who can broker a peace deal. That's for sure, because they've aligned themselves with the genocide, the perpetrator of genocide, and
Yes, and if there is a peace deal that comes to the Middle East, okay, at this point, I think I have to say it will probably be brokered by the Russians and the Chinese,
yes,
and maybe Turkey as well, but it won't be brokered by the United States.
no. I mean, we
Those
never.
days are over.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought, and people I know never thought that the U.S. was an honest broker, even though the U.S. had been branded as such. Now there is no way in heck anybody could say honest broker, given what's gone on. It's just those days, like you said, Dee. Those days are gone.
Yeah, those days when the United States could be described as honest are long gone.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, and yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so what we're looking at is the acceleration of emerging multipolarity, okay, in the world. Okay, as a result of the wars, okay, in Ukraine and the war, okay, in Gaza, and more generally in Palestine, because there is a war going on, okay, in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
The Israelis, even if they haven't actually declared war, okay, on the West Bank,
Oh,
uh, they've been prosecuting a low-level war on the West Bank for some time now.
using the Jewish settlers as the paramilitary, as we said earlier.
Yes, and they've been killing rather steadily hundreds of Palestinians. Okay, this year. I'm not
Mhm.
sure what the death total is up to now, but by now it has to be certainly 500 fatalities, 600 fatalities
On the West Bank?
on the
Mm.
West Bank. It's a steady stream.
Yeah.
It's a steady stream. There is total disorder there, okay, in the Palestinian areas. And the manufacturers of the disorder are the IDF, okay, and
Mhm.
the settlers. Okay, illegal settler violence. We're seeing it there every single day.
Yeah, which is why I said earlier that it is some I had read somewhere where people don't let's not call them, we can call them illegal Jewish settlers, but they're more than that. And that's why it's the paramilitary extension of the IDF, especially the ones that have been armed by Ben Gvir with those 10,000 automatic rifles.
Yes, he just handed out 10,000 automatic rifles to the illegal settlers.
Hmm.
Sure. So, okay. So, where does this leave the United States? I'm very interested, okay, in that question.
Hmm.
We've been putting in really huge amounts of financial resources in trying to maintain, okay, the hegemony of the United States in the world, while we have been neglecting domestic prosperity and well-being and health here in the United States. That has not been a financial necessity because of the power, okay, of a monetary sovereign, but okay, it has been the result of all manner of foreign policy schemes to maintain, okay, the hegemony of the United States, okay, in the world, while the executive pays little attention to what is going on with people here in the United States, to what the people suffer, to the
You need some
structure.
water, Joe?
Hmm?
You need some water?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Uh, we pay little attention to the structure of the political system here in the United States and to the oligarchy, which is now clearly developed here. Our politicians are basically servants, okay, of the financial oligarchs. And part of maintaining this is constantly directing attention to foreign policy crises of one kind or another and not actually paying attention to the sufferings of people here and to the increasingly precarious, okay, existence of people here, okay, in the United States. Now, how long this can go on, okay, I don't know. Okay, but I believe that as a result of the need of the oligarchy to maintain the electoral facade, okay, of a democracy,
Mm.
that they are still somewhat vulnerable because of the need, okay, to maintain that, and because of their own perception that they continue to have elections and to use the elections, okay, to legitimize themselves, and they do not think that these periodic elections will be a severe danger to their rule. That, of course, is something, okay, that I don't agree with. I think the continued existence of elections can be a threat, okay, to their rule. And what my Dump the Corruption series, okay, is about is trying to explain how that could change and trying to make the change happen. And so that's how our domestic situation then relates to the extremities of our foreign policy. All the attention that is placed on our foreign policy by the executive branch of government means that the domestic aspects of the executive branch are operating basically on automatic pilot, okay, from day to day, don't receive the attention from the president and the power players inside of the administration that domestic policy actually deserves. And one thing that Dump the Corruption is about is changing that and making sure there's plenty of attention paid to improving the lot of voters and people here, okay, in the United States. So I think, okay, on that note, I've said what I have to say here tonight, and I think I want to start to go over your comments. Unless you have any further comments, Madeline, okay, or you have any further comments, Dee, I will do that. Well, you're muted, Madeline.
See, okay, now I'm not. Thank you. One comment I would make, because I try every day to read mainstream media newspapers from the United States. I try because I want to know what the United States is saying about the wars that they're involved with. Notice I didn't say we're involved with, as I separate myself from what the U.S. is doing overseas. But what I see, and I can only read about 3 paragraphs out of every article, is that the mountain of lies just keeps on growing. And I, for one, and I don't know. I know you've spoken a lot, Joe, about if we have the choice, if the U.S. has the choice of Biden and Trump in 2024, the country is doomed. I just don't see how Joe Biden is going to get reelected. I do not see it. But if he does get reelected, it's because the lying machine is working in overdrive. And I cannot. I can only read for about 5 minutes before I want to throw my phone out the window, because it's just so steeped in lies about what the reason, rationale for being in supporting Israel with Gaza. I don't know. There's not that much written about Zelensky in Ukraine anymore, but I guess that'll come back out because there just was an aid package that was kind of agreed to, but not. There's going to be a fight over taking money away from something else in order to pay for more money to go to Ukraine, or more money to go to Gaza, sorry, for the Israelis.
The Speaker of the House is insisting on taking money away from the IRS.
Yeah.
So
yes.
the IRS has less money to enforce the tax laws against the rich people of the country, and that seems to be his price for giving more money to Israel.
Well, and yes, and then what I've read is that that this would set, the Biden administration is saying no, this would set a dangerous precedent. But yeah, you give us this, if you give us this, we'll give you that, and it's all, you read it and you say, can we not just have a debate and discussion over what's really going on in these places and whether we still really want to be involved with them. Um, and I saw a comment that we can't, one country can't dictate the foreign policy of another, or the policies of another. I think the U.S. thinks it can and has been trying to in many places around the world, and it seems like maybe this is backfiring, coming back to haunt the U.S. now, and that's what I would want to say, that we can't, the U.S. cannot sustain a civil, logical, rational discussion about anything political anymore.
Well, Biden's not doing well anyway. From what I understand, with the polls are concerned, his demographic, the people that they talk about the demographic that he needs to be elected, the demographic the Democrats need, are standing with Palestine.
From what I understand, his approval ratings have now declined to 37%, which is really hugely low. He's lost, I guess, 4 points since the move to support the Israelis. Okay, so that's certainly a very important factor. But I want to say something about the idea that nations should decide of their foreign policy, for themselves. Okay, in particular, Robert Copeland says Ukraine should decide for itself if they want to side with the West or side, with Russia. Well, if we lived in a peaceful world and there were no power blocks and there were no national interests that focused on survival, and there were no nations trying to maintain themselves, as hegemons, of the world. If we had a secure and peaceful framework, among nations, and peace was not at issue, then yes, nations should decide for themselves who they want to side with, and who they don't want to side with. But that is not the real world, right now. And it may not be for a very long time to come. In the world we live in, it's necessary for one great power to worry about the moves made, by other great powers to undermine, the security of the first such power. In the case of the Russian situation, for years, the United States has been trying to surround Russia with hostile states, at least since the end of the 1990s. We've been trying to do that. And we largely succeeded, in doing that. The Baltic states, of course, are armed, and they have missiles that are pointed, at Russia. Also, Poland, hostile to Russia. Romania, hostile to Russia. Many, many countries close to the borders of Russia are aligned, with the collective West and are hostile, to Russia. Now, it may be the right of a country to decide who they want to side with, but it's also the right of a country to try to structure a situation so that it is secure and doesn't have any major threats against the integrity, okay, of its country. What the collective West was about to do, okay, with Russia was to incorporate the state, okay, of Ukraine into a collective security agreement that was clearly opposed, okay, to Russia. And their intentions were to station missiles inside, okay, of Ukraine, with the range of those missiles being such that they would be able to reach the capital of Russia, okay, within minutes. That was not a security risk that the Russians could reasonably tolerate. Now, they were very patient before they made the invasion, okay, of Ukraine. After the coup in 2014, the West took steps to arm, uh, to create a very large army, okay, inside, okay, of Ukraine. They armed that army very, very well. They expanded it to 3,000 soldiers and another 3,000, okay, in reserves. And there were armaments there for the reserves, okay, as well. So there were 600,000 troops that one could easily think were getting ready to attack Russia. They were making moves, okay, on the Donbass, threatening basically to slaughter the Russians in that part, okay, of Ukraine. It was only then, only when they started to move those troops, that the Russians actually invaded Ukraine. They had a legitimate concern for the security of their Russian counterparts that were part of Ukraine, and they had a legitimate concern for their own security. So they turned to armed force, okay, to settle it. Now we have to remember that they did not turn to armed force as a first resort. Before that, they negotiated the Minsk agreements, Minsk I and Minsk II. Those agreements were signed, and the Minsk II agreement was guaranteed by Germany and by France. And the Ukrainians decided they were not going to implement, okay, the signed agreements. If the agreements had been implemented, there wouldn't have been, okay, a Russian attack. So Russia tried to peacefully resolve, okay, the situation. And they only attacked when a very heavy military move, okay, was being made on the eastern part, okay, of Donbass. And even then, when the Russians came in, they only came in with 90,000 effective troops. And their total force was only 200,000. At that point, the Ukrainian armed forces greatly outnumbered them. The Russians were successful enough, however, to make the Ukrainians want to sit down to try to negotiate a peace. The mediator of that particular peace agreement was Turkey, and the negotiations for that peace took place in March of 2022. And the peace agreements were ready to be signed. And then there was a flight from Britain, okay, to Ukraine, okay, by Boris but Johnson. I almost said Boris Yeltsin, but it was Boris Johnson.
I thought the same, Joe. I had Yeltsin popped in my head.
Okay, and what he brought, okay, to Ukraine was, first of all, a warning from the Western powers saying there would be no more help for Ukraine if they made a peace, okay, with Russia. That was number one. And number two, if they decided to not go ahead with the peace agreement, they could count on unlimited support from the West for as long as it took. That was the NATO and U.S. guarantee they got from Boris Johnson. And so Zelensky decided that he wouldn't go along with the peace agreement after all. Okay. By the way, we know there was such a peace agreement because during the period when Ukraine was supposed to sign it, okay, and implement it, the Russians backed off, okay, of their attacks on Putin's orders. Okay, we know that. He had them back off because he thought the peace agreement, okay, was coming. And then all of a sudden, it was off in response to Johnson's visit. And then the Russians resumed, okay, their attacks. So, yes, ideally, it should be possible for Ukraine to decide for itself if they want to side with the West, okay, or side, okay, with Russia. But of course, Russian security considerations have to come into the calculation there because the Russians have a right, okay, to self-defense. They have a right to protect themselves in the same way, okay, the United States has a right, okay, to protect itself. Now, theoretically, Canada has a right, to decide that it's going to side with Russia and not actually side with the United States anymore. Mexico has that same right. But you know very well, if either of those countries were to make that kind of move with the present arrangement of power and the present arrangement of forces, then the United States would view itself as having the right to prevent that kind, okay, of realignment. And we would probably move strongly to overthrow the governments of Canada and Mexico to prevent that kind of realignment from taking place. And we would just say to the world that that was our right of self-defense. We would not act in any way that was different, okay, from the Russians. And the reality of the world is you have very large and powerful nations, smaller but still powerful nations, and smaller and not, okay, so powerful nations, and very small nations that have little international power. And the nations that have little or no international power have little choice when it comes to who they want to side with. That's the way it's been for centuries, and it's always going to be that way as long as we have a nation state type of system. Only if we can achieve, okay, a world government where all people, okay, are legally equal will we get away from that kind, okay, of model. That's the way international relations operates. And again, it always will operate that way until there is, okay, a world government. In the present situation, the balance of power, okay, among nations always has to be taken account of. Ukraine, unfortunately, is too close to Russia and too much of a threat, okay, to Russia for them to simply accept that Ukraine is going to side, okay, with the West. They might be able to tolerate small nations, like Latvia siding with the West or Lithuania siding with the West. I know they're not happy about that. But since those nations are fairly weak, it's not so important, okay, to Russia, okay, to try to change that. Okay, but okay, with Ukraine, that was a nation of 43 million people. That at one point was a nation of 54 million people. And there was no way the Russians could have, tolerated that. So Robert Copeland says one country can't dictate foreign policy of another country, so I disagree with you, Joe. Well, if what you mean by it cannot dictate the foreign policy of another country, okay, and what you mean by that is that it should not dictate the foreign policy of, um, 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 of another country, then I have to say, that in an ideal world, that is right. But once again, that is not the kind of world, okay, that we live in. It's the responsibility of the people who run, okay, the large nations to see to it that other countries that are fairly large and fairly powerful, okay, and close to them, don't have a foreign policy that is hostile to them. That is the responsibility of every large country. For example, the responsibility of Lula, okay, in Brazil, is to see to it that there aren't any other South American powers that want to align themselves, okay, against Brazil. And Brazil would certainly take action if there were such powers. The same thing applies to China. The same thing applies to Russia. And the same thing applies to India. They're not going to tolerate, and they do not tolerate, a large country close to their borders uh, 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 being dangerous to them. That's been the source of their conflicts with Pakistan and the source of their conflicts with China. And it will continue to be the source of their foreign policy activities towards China and Pakistan. And there's nothing anybody can do about that except to establish a framework for peace, okay, among those nations. By the way, we have to say that in Eastern Europe, okay, the United States was doing nothing to establish a framework of peace, okay, with the Russians. Instead, it was trying to establish a framework that it could use to disrupt the choices of people, okay, in Russia concerning who was going to lead them. We were trying to overthrow the government in Russia and to split up the Russian Federation. Those were our foreign policy goals, okay, with respect to Russia. Robert says, I think Governor Newsom might run for president in either 2024 or 2028. I think so too. In fact, I think there's a good chance he's going to run for president in 2024. I think there's a good chance Joe Biden is going to drop out shortly, and Governor Newsom is going to be the choice, okay, of the Democratic establishment. And by the way, I believe there's no E that's at the end of Newsom in his case, but you might want to double check that, Robert. Robert says, where is Venezuela on this anti-fracking issue, as a lot of their economy, okay, is as, okay, an oil exporter? I don't know, but I have the impression that oil resources, okay, in Venezuela are so plentiful that they don't have to frack to get, okay, their oil. I would add, even though their oil is very, very plentiful, and they can simply drill for it, okay, and get it. And the oil reserves, by the way, are thought to be the largest in the world. Their oil is well known to be a heavy form, okay, of crude oil, and it has to be refined to be used, okay, for many purposes. And Venezuela has suffered from the fact that it doesn't have the refinery capacity right there. In fact, a lot of its oil industry for years and years was based on it sending its oil to refineries here in the United States and getting their oil refined there, and then they would get it back and they would export it. Just a well-known fact. Steve Wolfbrand says, I'm back at 9:45. Thank you, Steve. Robert Copeland says, both Palestine and Israel would want to have peace, or there will be attacks from Hamas and Israel in the future, even if they get, okay, a ceasefire. Well, that's going to be a complication of the two-state solution, okay, of any negotiation. That is, what Israel is going to try to do is to negotiate a peace with the PLO, okay, and the West Bank. And then the PLO and the West Bank people are going to try to claim sovereignty, okay, over Gaza. And they'll be supported by Israel, they'll be supported by the United States, they'll be supported by Egypt, because the other Sunni Muslims don't care for Hamas. They think they're a terrorist group, okay, and they're dangerous, and they don't really support them. And so they will support the attempts by the other powers there, including Jordan, by the way, okay, to get the government of Hamas out of Gaza as part of any peace settlement, and then put together Gaza, okay, and the West Bank, okay, as the second state in a two-state solution. That's what they're probably going to try to make happen. But it's going to be difficult to get that actually done. Robert Copeland says, AIPAC is funding politicians. They're taking Israel's side in their attacks against Palestine. I know. And that's awful. And that's so one of the reasons why Dump the Corruption is so very important. I keep saying, and I'm going to keep saying until people believe me. We, the voters, have to make it a sin for the politicians to be taking any big money. And anybody who commits that sin has to be defeated. And any politician who does not repudiate, the large-scale support of super PACs has to be defeated, because that also has to be viewed as a sin. It has to be a rule for voters. If anybody is taking the big money, you have to vote against them. Whether they're in office or they're challenging, you have to vote against them. Steve Wolbrand says, Doc, why do we not have a single good candidate for office from president to Senate to Congress in this country? What in the hell is wrong with this place? Steve, it's money in politics. Okay. It's the corruption. When you think you have a good candidate, when they look good at the start, okay, and they get into Congress, soon they realize that to continue to win in the present system, they need some big money. Then they start taking it, and then they're bought. That's what is happening. Or they're afraid. Take a look at John Fetterman. When he was running for the Senate in Pennsylvania, he very clearly was avoiding. He was very clearly taking a pro-Israel position because he didn't want to get attacked by AIPAC or the pro-Israel forces. And they didn't line up against him. The election for Senate in Pennsylvania was very close. If he had lined up against Israel while he was running, he never would have won. So here he is. He's in the Senate right now. And the question of Palestinian rights comes up again. And the extreme situation with the Israeli bombings also comes up again. And what does Fetterman do? He stands behind the administration 100%. He stands behind Israel 100%. Why? Because he still doesn't want AIPAC and their super PAC to be lining up against him the next time he runs. He's afraid. The major progressive candidates that the left has supported since 2018 and who have got elected, the underdogs who got elected, are also afraid to come out against funding for Israel. Now, it looks like there are going to be 10 of them or something like that who are going to vote against this funding for Israel, this time around, because the Israeli actions in Gaza have been so extreme. So they aren't going to vote for the funding, but their votes really don't matter because there are only 10 of them. So it's the money. That's why we don't have a single good candidate from president to Senate, to Congress in this country. I'll tell you right now, if not for the money, then somebody like a Jeff Merkley would be a great candidate for president or again for Senate. But he's not, because the money is there. That he's still among the best of the senators in terms of what he votes for and does not vote for. We have some promising people there. But without getting the money out, they are not going to be effective. Even if they win office, they're not going to be effective. We have to get that money out. I know the Dump the Corruption movement has gone nowhere in the years since I've begun to talk about this. But I cannot give it up because of the question you just raised, Steve. Why do we not have a single good candidate for office? What in the hell is wrong with this place? It's the money. Until we get it out, we will not have a single good candidate for office, from president to Senate to Congress, okay, in this country. Robert Copeland says, President Biden approval rating have declined for a long time. Yes, but 37% is close to a new low. Looks like the war in Gaza is going to go on for some time to come, maybe another month or two. And he'll be losing approval all through this time. Might even get down as low as 33%. His approval rating can get low enough that he will decide to hang it up. And then Gavin Newsom will be waiting in the wings to take the spot. Steve Wolpert said Ukraine is extremely corrupt and stealing most of the money we're sending there. Right, Steve, absolutely correct. After Russia started their attack last year, of course, 2 other countries joined NATO that are close to Russia, which are Sweden and Finland. So, Robert, the total populations of Sweden and Finland put together are not half what the population of Ukraine was at the start of the war. I believe Finland's population is about 5 million. You can double check me on that. Sweden's population is about 11 million, and I'm quite confident that I'm correct about that. So both of those together are less of a threat than Ukraine was at the time. Robert Copeland says that Ukraine is no threat to Russia. Well, it's not much of a threat now because Russia marched in and has taken care of the threat. It was a threat when Russia marched in. It was a country of 43 million people with an army of 600,000. That was more. That was a larger army than Russia had mobilized at that time. So they were a threat to Russia. And they were a threat to Russians living in Ukraine. They were a threat. And they would have been a much more serious threat if they had become a part of NATO. Steve Oprant says, I remember Boris Badenov and Natasha from Bullwinkle and Squirrel. The propaganda in this country is insane. It is. And Steve Wolpert says, share this to your groups. What are the populations of Sweden and Finland, as they are much bigger than the 3 Baltic countries? Well, as I said, I believe the populations of Sweden and Finland put together, and they are much bigger than the 3 Baltic countries, are about 16 million people. Which was a little more than 1/3 of the size of Ukraine in population at the start of the war. And by the way, Sweden and Finland have very small armies, very small standing armies. They're not much when it comes to military force. Why? Because there hasn't been any threat from Russia. That's why they stayed neutral. And the only reason why they didn't stay neutral this time was because of the utter stupidity of their leaders. I mean, their leaders at this point were such lightweights. They just did something incredibly stupid, both countries did. especially Finland, which shares such a long border, okay, with Russia. Steve says, I've been to Brazil and Venezuela. I've seen socialism. I've seen pallets of cinder blocks dropped off at poor people's properties to build a house for free. I saw that shit with my own eyes. Yeah, that was going on in Venezuela. I don't know if it was going on, okay, with respect to Brazil, but in Venezuela, that's what the Chavez regime was doing, and that's what, okay, the Maduro regime is still doing. Robert says there are a lot of terrible politicians, even down to city council or even at a local level school board, as they take corporate money. Yeah, that people are pretty gun shy about donating after Bernie burned us. Well, I think that's the point. If everybody decides to vote against the big money, then new candidates won't have to raise big money to get elected. Dump the corruption. The rule is a big equalizer for people. Robert Copen says the combined population of Sweden and Finland is around 16 million. Robert, I think you'll generally find that my population estimates, when I come out and say the population is such and such and such and such, that I may not be exact, but I'm pretty in the ballpark about it. I pay attention to those demographics, okay, of nations. I have a feel for them. So, I think that's about it for this evening. Okay, I thank you for coming. I thank you for the discussion. I thank you for keeping on coming. Okay, I have a small group here, but you are a very loyal group, and I thank you for that. So good night. I'll be back tomorrow night with the Dump the Corruption show. I'm sure I'll have some really good stuff for you. This coming Friday, Christina Khalil, who's running for the Senate in New Jersey, will be coming back. She ran into a very uncomfortable personal situation last Friday, and she wasn't able to make it. But I'm assured by her that she will certainly be here for the Friday Dump the Corruption show. And one thing we're going to talk about on that show is Dump the Corruption.
That's good.
And whether she can run a full-blown Dump the Corruption campaign, whether she will run it. So that should be very interesting. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet on Thursday night, but that is, as you know, the neoliberalism show. So I think that's always, okay, an interesting show. So again, thank you for coming, and Dee, thank you for coming, and thank you for remaining. Have you any?
You're welcome.
Have you any last comments to make?
I think you did good. You covered a lot of information, and
Okay, thank you.
just every day is,
Yeah, there's a lot of
things are changing. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of information to cover. Okay, so thanks for coming again, and good night.
Yes. Good night.
Okay, I'll see you.
Yeah. Well, buy Joe coffee.
Oh yeah, buy me a coffee, and please go to my Patreon page
Yes.
as well.
Good night, Bonnie. And yeah, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share too.
Yes, please do. And I think Steve Wolfbrand also said to please share.
Yes. Good
And
deal.
please do share. Okay, bye everybody.